Try to remember your third birthday. Go ahead. Try harder. You can't, can you? Not the cake, not the candles, not the song everyone sang while you stared at the flame, waiting for someone to tell you what to do next. Most people assume they simply forgot, the same way you forget a phone number or a forgettable Tuesday. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain never stored that memory in the first place, and it did that on purpose. This is called infantile amnesia, and almost everyone has it. It is not a flaw. It is not proof that your early childhood didn't matter. Things happened to you. You learned to walk, you learned to speak, you fell in love with a blanket or a stuffed animal and screamed when someone tried to take it from you. None of that is gone because it never occurred. It's gone because of how your brain was physically built at the moment it occurred. The term itself comes from Sigmund Freud, who coined infantile amnesia in 1905. Freud had his own theories about why this happens, most of them tangled up in ideas about repression and forbidden desire that modern neuroscience has mostly set aside. But he was right about the pattern. Somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7, the memories of early childhood quietly dissolve, and they almost never return. Not with hypnosis, not with therapy, not with old photographs spread across a kitchen table. Once they're gone, they're gone. Here's where it gets strange. Babies are not blank. They are not empty vessels waiting for life to begin writing on them. Infants recognize their mother's voice within days of birth. They remember faces, routines, even a toy that moved a certain way weeks earlier. Psychologist Carolyn Rovey Collier spent decades proving this with a deceptively simple setup called the conjugate reinforcement paradigm. Infants learned that kicking their legs made a mobile above their crib spin. Weeks later, placed under that same mobile, the babies started kicking again, immediately, before anyone reminded them how. The memory was there. It worked. It was retrievable. So, if infants can remember, why can't you remember being one? The answer lives in a curled, seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus. And what was happening inside it while you were far too young to know anything was happening at all. The hippocampus is the part of your brain responsible for building long-term, detailed, retrievable memories, the kind you can replay later like a film. The problem is that in early childhood, this structure is still mid-construction. It's generating new neurons at an extraordinary rate, a process called neurogenesis. New cells flood in, wire themselves into existing circuits, and quietly rearrange the furniture as they go. That sounds like a good thing. More growth, more learning, more potential. But growth has a cost most people never think about. Every time a fresh neuron inserts itself into a circuit that's already holding a memory, it can disrupt the very connections storing that memory. Neuroscientist Paul Franklin and his team at the University of Toronto demonstrated this directly in a 2014 study. In mice, boosting neurogenesis made old memories fade faster. Slowing it down made memories last longer. The very process building a young brain is the same process quietly erasing what that brain just lived through. Sit with that for a second. You were not unconscious before the age of 4. You were not absent from your own life. You were forming memories constantly, urgently, the way every small child does, reaching for the world with both hands. And your own brain was dismantling most of those memories almost as fast as it built them, simply because it needed the space to keep growing into something else. It gets stranger still. Memory isn't only about storage. It's about retrieval, about being able to find what you once stored and drag it back into the light. Psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University has spent years tracking exactly how a child's earliest memories fade in real time. Her research followed children who could vividly describe an event at age 3, then tested them again a few years later. By around age 7, Most of them had lost access entirely to events from before age 4, the same events they had once described in detail. The memories didn't vanish instantly, like a light switching off. They eroded piece by piece, the way a photograph left out in the sun slowly loses its color, until what was once a vivid scene became nothing. Not a blur, not a fog you could squint through, nothing. Why would a brain do this to itself? Because the brain you have now and the brain you had at 2 years old needed almost nothing in common. At 2, you were learning what objects are, what gravity does, what your own hands are even for. You needed a flexible, rapidly rewiring system built for absorption, not permanence, a system optimized to learn the rules of physical reality as fast as possible. By the time you were 7 or 8, your needs had flipped. You needed continuity. You needed a stable, ongoing sense of who you are, where you've been, and what happened to you and when. So the hippocampus shifted slowly from a system built to learn fast into a system built to remember long. And the price of that shift was almost everything that came before it. There's a quiet twist hiding inside all of this, one that should make you a little suspicious of your own mind. The memories you do carry from early childhood, the ones that feel certain and vivid, are often not memories at all. They're reconstructions, a photograph you've seen 100 times, a story your parents told at every family dinner until it became part of the family's mythology. Your brain, hungry for a beginning to its own story, will sometimes borrow these secondhand fragments and stitch them into something that feels exactly like first-hand experience. You're not lying when you insist you remember falling off that swing at age 2. You're doing what every human brain does under the same conditions, filling a gap with the nearest available material and calling it the past. Researcher Chi Wang at Cornell University has spent years comparing earliest memories across cultures and found something equally telling. The age at which earliest memory begins, and even what kind of memory people report first, shifts depending on how a culture talks about the self, the family, and the past. Children raised in cultures that narrate daily life in rich detail, asking, "What did you do today?" And then, "What happened?" And then, "What?" tend to report earlier and more elaborate first memories than children raised in cultures that talk about the past less often. Memory, it turns out, isn't only a biological event. It's something partly built through conversation, through being asked to tell the story of your own life before you're old enough to write it yourself. This isn't only a story about toddlers, it's a story about how identity gets built at all. You walk through the world believing you are the sum of your memories, a single continuous thread running from your first breath to this exact moment. But that thread has a missing beginning. Everyone's does. The self you believe you've always been actually starts somewhere in the middle, stitched onto several years of near total silence, like a book missing its first chapters that still somehow make sense by the time you start reading. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you a little. This is still happening. Not infantile amnesia exactly, but the same underlying mechanism, quietly working inside your skull right now, today, as you listen to this. Adult brains generate new neurons too, especially in the hippocampus, just at a far slower rate than a toddler's. Every memory you make today is, in some small way, vulnerable to the next memory you're about to make tomorrow. Growth and forgetting were never separate processes happening side by side. They were always the same process, wearing two different faces. So, the next time you try to picture your third birthday and come up with nothing, you are not failing at something everyone else can effortlessly do. You are running into the cost of having a brain that was busy becoming something rather